Welcome to the Humble Hoof podcast. My name is Alicia Harlov. This is a podcast for both horse owners and hoof care professionals, offering discussions into various philosophies on the health of the hoof and soundness of your horse. Please check us out on Facebook or at thehumblehoof.com.
Trying to choose the right supplements for the right horses often feels like a chore, and you have enough chores as it is. Fortunately, there's Equithrive, whose mission is to make this whole nutrition equation easier on you and much more beneficial to your horses. Equithrive's lineup of pelleted supplements are developed with care, backed by science, and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Not to mention picky eater approved. Whether you need advanced joint care for your equine athlete, gut, or metabolic support, Equithrive is your one-stop shop for feed tub fortification. Do your horses and yourself a favor and visit equithrive.com. Use the promo code HumbleHoof and get 20% off your first order, plus free and fast shipping nationwide. Don't forget to use HumbleHoof, all one word, to get 20% off your first order at equithrive.com.
A special thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Cavallo. For our Humble Hoof listeners, they are offering 15% off their Cavallo Trek hoof boots using the coupon code HRN at checkout. The Trek is the world's most popular and versatile hoof boot and Cavallo's toughest trail boot, while also doubling as an option for therapy or rehab. The front closure system makes it easily adaptable to various hoof shapes, and TPU upper design allows for maximum strength while minimizing weight for the comfort and ease of movement for your horse. These are recommended by vets and trainers and also loved as transport boots by barrel racers, show jumpers, dressage riders, and everyone in between. Again, for 15% off a pair of Treks, use the code HRN at checkout at cavallo-inc.com. I've been following the Hoof Architect on Facebook for a while now and just been fascinated by the posts of how different conformation correlates to hoof shape. And I've known this for a while. I've often come up to Hooves and I can tell by the way that they wear what their primary loading and conformation pattern is. But there's so much more to it that I didn't realize until I saw Ula Krzanowska's post. And I hope I said her last name right. So I reached out to Ula to see if she would chat with me on the podcast a little bit about how she ended up in hoof care when she originally was an architect. I'm also really excited to be hosting Ula along with Celeste Lazaris and Dr. Jenny Hagan next October 2025 in Massachusetts for a clinic. And there's only a few spots left. So if anybody is interested in hearing more in person with Ula and the other two amazing clinicians, go on to thehumblehoof.com and look under the podiatry clinic tab and you can learn how to register. All right. So the first question is, how did you get into hoof care?
So my story, I would say it's both untypical and maybe also actually quite typical because, it's untypical because I never had like the proper farrier training before I started working with Hooves. So I was like mostly self-taught at the beginning, especially. And I was actually learning, doing my own horse's feet. But on the other hand, I know quite a lot of people that have got into hoof care this way, like because they had problems with their own horses and their horses had problematic feet and they just to learn it for themselves. So this was actually my story. And to be honest, I actually never really wanted to become a farrier and I never even considered it for real that I might become a farrier one day before I actually just became one. So with my horse, he was actually always lame after being trimmed or after being shot. Maybe during like the first year I had, he was fine. But the older he was getting, the more problematic his feet were becoming. So at some point, I just decided that it doesn't make sense for me to pay someone to come and make my horse lame because he would be fine. Like the more weeks went from the trim, the better he was. So every time I was selling a farrier, I knew that he was going to become worse. So at some point, I just bought a rasp and I asked the farrier to just show me briefly how to shorten the toe. And actually my horse did very well with this for a couple of years. Yeah, but of course it was not enough to like really help him, because he had very flat, weak feet. And yeah, he wasn't lame. He was fine to be ridden, but the hoofs had still lots of problems. So I was trying to learn more and more to just try and improve his feet as much as possible. And yeah, only after like many years, I have realized how difficult of a case he actually was, and how really bad his feet were. And yeah, they were actually one of the weakest hoops I have been working on, like so far to this point. So yeah, later at some point, I also realized that my mare needs shoeing. She had really nice hoops, but she was not comfortable barefoot, and I was trying all I could, and I just couldn't find her a way to be sound barefoot, and she was really having some tensions in her body. And until now, I don't know what her problem actually is. It may be some kind of neurological issue, but I just accepted the fact that she needs the shoes. And it was so weird for me to just go back to using farriers. So I decided that I just have to learn to shoe by myself. So I had a farrier friend who came, and he has taught me like the most important things, the basic stuff. And then I was practicing a lot on that feet. And then with his supervision, I have shot her for the first time. And then I just started showing more and more horses. And so it was really like gradual process. I have been asked more and more by my friends or friends of my friends who had some problems with their horses' feet to come and help them. So I was just taking some more cases. At some point, I just realized that my schedule was almost full. At the beginning, I met a guy also starting with hoofcare. So we decided to just go on and collaborate. So we were doing a lot of stuff together. His name is Adam Król, and actually until now we are still doing some things together. If we have a like more difficult case, or if we have a lot of horses to do in one barn, we just go together. And he's my great friend. Yeah, I think it has helped us both a lot that we just go through the beginnings together. So also at the beginning, I wanted to focus more because I didn't really believe that I will be capable of working physically so hard. I also was a little bit reluctant to get into this industry, because also like from my client perspective, I knew that it can be sometimes quite ungrateful. So I also I wanted to get into hoofcare from the other direction. So I started 3D printing. I was inspired by Derek Poppard a lot, and so I was doing a lot of 3D scans of hooves, like really analyzing them, trying to find some creative solutions to problems. But then I thought, I need to have some horses I work on to just be able to see the reaction, how they respond to my ideas. And so it just at one point I realized I don't have time for that anymore, because my day is full with just trimming and shoeing horses from the morning until night. And so this is more or less how it went.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I also think that Derek Poppard is just one of my favorite farriers. So I'm glad that he's had like an influence on your work too. And I know that, you were saying that obviously you got into this because of your horse, and a lot of us have as well had like a problem horse that gets us into hoof care. And you had a background in architecture before that, right?
Yes.
How did your architecture background influence your approach in hoof care?
Yeah, so at first, actually, I thought that it had just nothing to do. I felt like I wasted 7 or 8 years of my life and my whole like university time and my professional work after that. And I wasn't in a really like good psychological condition at this point. I was like, okay, just I don't want to think about it. I just leave it behind and just start something new. But then actually later, when I started to spend more and more time with the like hoofcare people and discuss stuff together, I realized that actually my perspective was quite different than like most people's. And yeah, because I didn't have like this regular training before in hoofcare, actually until last year there was no like no farrier school in Poland at all. So it wasn't even possible if I wanted. I had no idea that like I didn't really know what other hoofcare people know when they trim the horses, and I didn't understand their approach. So I thought that everything was known, everything was clear, like well researched, and that every decision the farrier makes is like based on really good knowledge, and that nothing is random. And then I realized how many things are missing, how many things are misunderstood. And also, like when I started to like talk to my friends and to other people who were associated with hooves and horses, I started to understand those differences in approach and where they came from. And I also started noticing like more and more misunderstandings in hoofcare, which were a lot of them were just clearly geometrical. So I think my like architectural approach was something that was really making these things like pointing them up at me. And I think there are a lot of such understandings in hoofcare. And I also found out that people were really interested in my approach. Because at first I was like, probably everybody thinks about it the same, or even if they don't, they just don't want to know other people's ways. But many people were asking me to explain my perspective. I was feeling really encouraged to try and put it in clear words, and after some time, I just started to publish some stuff. And yeah, at this point, I really think that my architectural background had a huge influence, even though I didn't realize it at first, and I really didn't appreciate it enough. Of course, it's not that I just walk with a pencil behind my ear and like do mathematical equations about hooves, because it's completely not like this. But I think just the general understanding of three-dimensional space and structure, which I think I largely have to my architectural training, that it is really something that is very valuable in hoofcare. And also another thing, like all those graphical and 3D modeling skills, which I of course also got thanks to architecture, it's really invaluable, because the fact that I am able to just illustrate my points by myself, I don't need to rely on anybody with that. It's super helpful. So now I start to think that maybe it was just meant for me to like that I had to go through this architectural thing and really decide to change profession and then only become a farrier. Because yeah, I really start to appreciate it more and more.
Yeah, and I really have loved your post because I think it's so fascinating how you look at hooves, and I assume a lot of it has to do with your architectural background of being able to see the weaker points in the hooves and how they're, a steep or a flared side of the foot, or where it's coming from up the limb. And sometimes I'll read your posts over and over again and look at the pictures and just kind of imagine what you're seeing, because my brain doesn't work completely the same way, but it's so cool. And obviously I see feet that have these kind of wear patterns in my day-to-day work, but I've never really put the two and two together of how much patterns you see in terms of certain conformation or certain, angular limb deformities or things like that affect how much you're seeing these feet. So, I know that there's so many different examples of this, but can you give one example of a common correlation that you see between conformation and hoof presentation? Just something that you might see more often than others?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So there are like really lots of repetitive patterns, like you said, like the conformation of the limb and body above. It really, you can, if you really like understand it, at some point you can just look at the hoof and tell what's the conformation of the body above. And like the I think the most common pattern in front feet, mostly when it comes to the mediolateral deformities and the conformation in the mediolateral aspect. I think this is the hoof that I would call type 1, which is really the most common. So these are the front feet. I think based on that, there is made this assumption that every front hoof is wider on the lateral side and more on the medial side. So these are the feet that have more steep medial wall. They have more sloping lateral wall. Sometimes there is a flare on the lateral wall. The medial can be even like run under. They may have sheared heels with the medial heel being pushed up. And they're like more oval shape on the medial side and more round on the lateral. I have tried them quite extensively in my blog, so I even try to make those pictures. But this type of hoof, I have realized that it's mostly created by the conformation of the fetlock joint and by the conformation of the pastern itself. So almost every horse, and some people say every, I'm not sure because sometimes this is very subtle, but almost every horse, when you examine the pastern bones, P1 and P2, they present a medial twist. And I have some ideas where it may be coming from. And of course, it starts when the horse is very young, the first days and weeks of the foal's life. But I've never ever seen the pastern bone twisted to the outside. So, but when this twist is very subtle and mild, it doesn't really create distortions in the feet. But when it's more pronounced, it starts to change the relationship between the direction of work between the fetlock joint and the coffee joint itself. So then fetlock starts to drop not in line with the hoof capsule, but it starts to drop more medially. And this is what shifts the center of pressure and changes the load distribution over the hoof, creates this distortion pattern which I have described. So it makes the medial wall more steep. It often creates the sheared heel, so the medial heel is getting pushed up, and you have all like the whole set of features that go together with this type of hoof distortion. And it also creates very characteristical wear patterns, not in every case, because there are like more factors that influence wear patterns. I think wear patterns are very they tell so much about the whole horse and the hoof, but it depends. I think it maybe even depends more on the conformation higher up, over above the hoof, and not just the hoof balance itself. But once you start to see those correlations, it's something you just cannot unsee. And I think it's actually very helpful to be aware of them, because then you can just take decisions quicker. And I use it a lot in my daily work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there are some that I most commonly see, in my head, I always think if a hoof is toed in, then usually their medial wall will flare. And I know that's not a blanket statement. And I know that's not always true, because it depends on where up the limb the rotational deformity is coming from. But I guess something that I always struggle with, and I don't know that I have necessarily a good answer myself, which is why I'm asking you, is the wear pattern of the foot indicative of how well or how balanced your trim is? Like, if we have a good balanced trim that's working for the horse, should that foot wear more evenly and become more even over time? Or is it something that we're just kind of always trying to chase that flare or that, uneven wear?
Yes, I think it's actually a great question. And as far as I think, the wear patterns, they really tell us so much about the hoof and the body above and the whole horse. I don't think that this in itself is such an indicator of proper or improper trim, because I think, like I said, that it depends on so many factors, which are maybe more significant than the hoof balance itself. So it also depends on the surface, the surface properties, the conformation of the limb above, the balance of the whole horse, how it's trained, how it's ridden, and every injury is going to also influence how the horse is wearing their feet. But what I think is, in my opinion, like the best indicator of the proper trim is the growth pattern. So how evenly the hoof capsule grows, in its circumference over time. And this is something that I see can change, it can change hugely depending on hoof balance, how the hoof is being trimmed, how it's being shod. But yeah, of course, it also depends on conformation. So it's not that it only depends on the trim. I see that the more balanced the trim, the more balanced we leave the hoof after the trim or shoeing, the more evenly it's going to grow. So yeah, of course, it's not like that if the hoof doesn't grow perfectly evenly, the trim is bad. But if it grows more evenly than it used to, then I think it's really, really a great sign. And that's why I also really like comparing photos after the trim and before the next trim, before I even touch the hooves. I think it gives you a really invaluable input. So yeah, actually, if I see the hoof that is growing, I see the growth rings that are perfectly parallel, then I may be pretty convinced that the trim was correct and the hoof balance is really spot on. But of course, it's not always going to be possible. And also, for example, an uneven worker can mess up with that. So even if we manage to balance the hoof perfectly, but then the horse gets some kind of tension somewhere in the body and it starts to compensate for it, it may happen that the hoof is going to be worn unevenly, and then it's also going to influence the rate of growth. So yeah, it of course is it's quite complex. But like you said, like straighter walls and even growth rings, for me, it's a great indicator of a proper or improving hoof balance, and of also the shape of the walls. If they are straight or bent or flared, it also correlates to the rate of growth. So if I see the flares start to grow out, they become straighter, or the wall that was overlaid starts to stand up and start to grow straighter, then usually I get very happy. But of course, there are so many things we need to take into account that it's not simple that only if I get even growth, I can know that my trim was good. Because sometimes our hands are tight at some point. We work with hooves, but we cannot fix the issues that are higher up in the body, which are very often unrelated.
Yeah. So obviously, it's great if we see more even growth after we've trimmed or have been working on an issue, but it doesn't necessarily mean, I'm just trying to clarify, it doesn't necessarily mean that if it isn't getting straighter, that it's necessarily the trim, or should we always try to get that straighter wall?
No, actually, I think we have to try and see, and the hoops are going to tell us within 1, 2, 3 cycles. So in many cases, I don't expect to get much improvement, and then I'm surprised because they improve so much. And there are other ones that I'm sure I know what to do, and I do that, and I'm sure they will really be so much better. And then I come back, and they are basically the same or just a little bit better. So I think, like you said, no hoof is perfect, and it's not our goal to just get this perfect shape. I like to say that we want to get the hoof to the least distorted state possible for a certain hoof. But how it is going to look like, I think we just have to try and see. And also it can change over time. If, for example, the horse had some kind of problem, some kind of tension, some kind of compensation, and it improves with good training, with physiotherapy, with good shoeing and trimming. The hoof that was the least distorted possible for this horse at one point, it may change and the limit might change for us. So within a couple of months, we may be able to get the hoof to even better shape. But then if something happens, in a year, for example, the horse gets more crooked. Someone has been training it incorrectly, and it stands up and it's moving incorrectly. The hoof might get distorted, even though we work like the same way and we trim it similarly and we show it similarly. It may change because, yeah, like I said, it's so complex and it depends on so many factors. And there are so many variables that I don't think it's good to put any like rigid frames on that.
Yeah, I have seen cases where I feel like they're just not improving and there's been issues higher up. But I've also loved seeing your pictures where you can really see a difference and an improvement in a hoof distortion just even between, a few trims that you've done. And also I'm really excited that you're able to come and do a clinic with us next year here in Massachusetts, because we have some really, at least on the farm right now, we have some really interesting cases of some very distorted feet. And some of them have, old injuries higher up. Like one horse had a previously broken pelvis. And so obviously there's a lot of compensation that you're not going to completely get rid of. But it's always really interesting to see, like, is there a better way that we could approach this hoof? Or is there something that I'm not seeing because I don't have that background of looking at the structural integrity of the limb above it and that kind of thing?
Awesome. I'm very excited about your invitation as well. And I really like getting those challenging, crooked, weird cases. It always gives your brain more motivation to think and to find solutions. And I'm very excited about it too.
Awesome. Yeah. And do you have any, kind of last minute advice or parting words for owners or farriers or anybody who's dealing with a difficult case?
It's a hard question, but I would think that I would advise you to, if the tools you have are not helping, don't give up and don't think that, okay, this case is just not possible to be helped. We cannot improve it at all. Just try to think outside of the box. And I recently had some cases that I thought that maybe we may not be able to help, but then I was trying to really approach it from different perspective, and very often you end up coming with a new solution. So this was also my way with the hoof distortions research, because I thought at some point that you cannot help those distorted hoofs. Then of course I thought that you can help every distorted hoof. But I was really experimenting a lot, of course, in the safe range. So I was not trying to do like anything risky for the horses, but I was doing one thing and seeing what is going to happen. And if it didn't help, I was trying to do something different. And I think we are not really given most people, they are not given the tools how to handle certain problems. Of course, there are problems in hoofcare that like the solutions are quite known and they really work, but there are also many problems that the official solutions just don't work. So I think there is still so much we can and we should discover, that if something doesn't work, just try something else and think about it and think and don't give up. But also, on the other hand, I know some people that they believe they will fix the horse in one way and they continue for years and years, and the horse is uncomfortable. So on the other hand, we just need to observe the horse's response and just let it be the judge if our actions are doing the benefit for the horse or if not. And if they are not helping, then just change something.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being willing to chat with me.
No problem. I'm very happy for the invitation.
Yeah, and have a good rest of your drive home and have a great night.
Sure. And you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Let's keep in touch. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I always say that I'm slightly more hoof obsessed than the average person, and chances are, if you're listening to a hoof care podcast, you are too. So we should probably be friends. Feel free to find me on Facebook or email me at thehumblehoof@gmail.com.